What's up, guys? Let's talk trial. If all you had for jury selection was 10 minutes for 30 people, what would you spend those 10 minutes on? That's a question that comes up often for myself, especially when I'm in jurisdictions like federal court, where if you get 5-10 minutes for jury selection, you're getting a lot of time in the way they see it. So it's one of those things that is good to think about, because it's a good transition thought into the purpose of jury selection and how to do a good jury selection. And here's what I mean by that, right? If you had unlimited time to conduct jury selection, if you had days and weeks to talk to 30 people in court, then perhaps your goals for jury selection could be different. Perhaps you could do things in jury selection that we do not do now. And the reason for that is because of time, right? Because every time you go pick a jury, no matter if it's the biggest case of all time or the smallest case of all time, you will have a time limit for how long you can speak to that jury panel, right? So coming from the point that you will have a time limit, and that time limit will usually not be as much time as you want, then the question is, well, what's the most effective way to use my time, right? What could we do with a short period of time to maximize our jury selection and to increase the chances that we have a jury that works for our case? So the way I like to do things when I'm doing trial advocacy, when I'm trying to learn new skills in trial advocacy or figure out if what I'm hearing from people makes sense or if this is something we should do, is I like to look at the pros and the cons of everything. So let's say, what could we do for jury selection? What are the potential possibilities, right? Well, one possibility is, if I had 10 minutes to speak to 30 people, I'm going to get up there and I'm going to try to get the 30 people to like me, right? Like, I'm going to get the jury to like me as a person, because, maybe if they like me, they're more likely to find for me and my client. And while that sounds cool, and that sounds like something that could make sense, because you're thinking, well, there's some research out there that says if somebody likes a person, they're more likely to find for them. It doesn't really make a lot of sense in jury selection, and here's why. There's not a lot of bang for your buck. Like, you finish doing whatever thing you're doing, try to get the jury to like you, and then you go back to your table, and then you have to pick the jurors that you think are going to be best for your case. And if all you did was try to get them to like you, you're going to have a very hard time figuring that out, because number one, it's not the most exact of sciences to figure out who liked you and who didn't like you from the people that you interacted with. People could be laughing and they thought some of the stuff you did was funny, but they may not necessarily like you. People maybe they didn't react all that much, but they're thinking, oh man, I love this guy. He's real funny, or he's whatever. I could really, like this guy. So the kind of information you're able to get from one of those, let's try to get the jury to like me jury selections, it's going to be very limited. And then when you get back to the table, it's hard to pick who liked you or didn't like you, or liked you the most or liked you the least, because all of that's going to be very subjective, right? And then the second thing is, well, even if somebody likes you, it does not necessarily mean they're going to find for you. Think about your family. You may be very close with your family. I'm very close with my parents and things like that. But I can guarantee you there are certain things that my parents would never agree with me on, and vice versa, I would never agree with them on. So just because somebody likes you doesn't necessarily mean they're going to find for you. So I think that the value in that is limited. So let's put that aside for a second. So what's the next thing that we could do? Okay, so we're not going to do the let's get them to like us thing. Could we get them to agree with our version of events? Could we change their minds as to things that are critical for our case? And putting aside the pre-trial aspects of that, meaning putting aside the fact that the judge may stop you because you're talking about the facts of the case, etc., the question that you got to ask yourself is, well, is 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, or let's say even an hour, is that enough to change the minds of 30 people on things that they've been dead set on for the last 20, 30, 40 years? Are you that good that you can convince the jury in half an hour that to see the world in a very different way than they have seen it for the last 30, 40, 50 years? I don't think I'm that good. I think there's zero chance that I'm convincing anybody to change their views on the world. You know, I'm thinking whoever goes in there, if they've been prejudiced their whole life, you know, against Hispanics, black people, white people, whatever it may be, there's nothing I can say to them in 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes that's going to change their mind. And so, and not just obviously not just with prejudice, it's just an example, but just about anything that they have strong beliefs on, I have zero chance in my mind that I'm going to change their mind. Just like there's zero chance that somebody's going to change my mind about my deeply held beliefs in 5 to 10 minutes. Especially if I don't even know that person. A random stranger comes up to me and starts telling me how I should think completely different about the way I've been seeing the world for the last 30 years. It's probably not going to happen, bro. You know what I mean? So, so we don't, you know, in 10, 20 minutes, getting the jury to like us is probably not the best idea. Getting the jury to change their minds about deeply held beliefs, also not the best idea. You don't have enough time, and probably you don't have enough skill. I don't have enough skill, you know? So then, what else can you do? Well, here's the true and tried method of jury selection, or rather, we call it jury deselection. And that is, you find out who in that jury box has deeply held beliefs that are going to hurt your case. And there's few advantages, there's actually many advantages to that. The few big ones are, the moment somebody says, at least in my jurisdiction, the moment somebody expresses a deeply held belief that shows a leaning against you, that person's gone. You know, you don't need to get scientific about it. You don't need to do social studies and try to figure out what that means. Literally, those words that the person used that show a leaning against your case are going to make that person be off the jury. So that in itself is pretty easy, pretty straightforward. It does not take a lot of, you know, a lot of subjective analysis. Obviously, the art of eliciting those answers, of getting people to speak to you honestly and openly, that's an art, and that's something that you would practice. But as far as once you get that raw data, the amount of analysis that it takes, it's pretty straightforward. So there you have an advantage. The second advantage is that when people have deeply held beliefs, if you do it right, it does not take a lot of time to get them to express them to you. You know, for example, if you go somewhere and there's 20 people that you know sitting down and you start talking about, I don't know, gun rights or something, I guarantee you 30 seconds into it, you're going to have 15 different opinions from the 20 people that are there. And they're going to be very different, you know. Some people are going to be very pro, some people are going to be very against, but they're going to be very easily shared. They're going to be opinions that they want to share because they feel strongly about it. Now, mind you, sometimes people feel kind of ashamed and stuff like that. Like if you're talking about racism and sexism and things like that, that takes a little bit more skill. But when you're talking about things that are not like that, like for example in a personal injury case, a lot of people may feel, you know what, pain and suffering is not a real thing. You're here to win the lottery. A lot of people will straight up tell you that. You know, in criminal cases, a lot of people will think, look, if you're arrested, if you've been arrested by the police and charged by the prosecutor, you're probably guilty. A lot of people will tell you that. They want to tell you that because they don't see anything wrong with those opinions. So if you have a limited amount of time for jury selection, which we always do, we never have, at least I've never had 3 days to talk to 30 people, or 4 days. But even if I did have 4 days, I don't think I'd be able to change the minds of people on things that they've, you know, beliefs that they've had for 40 years. And also, I don't think that getting them to like me for 4 days is really going to make any significant difference, because at the end of the day, they may like you very much, but if they have deeply held beliefs that stand against everything you're telling them, they're going to go with their deeply held beliefs over their likely, or you know, how much they like you or not. So basically, if you have a limited amount of time for jury selection, like you always do, then my opinion is you got to go with the elimination of jurors by eliciting information that shows that they are biased against your case or biased for the other side. Primarily because that kind of stuff, it's information that's very actionable. You could do a lot with it without getting too scientific with it and too subjective and too, you know, I have a hunch and stuff like that. And secondly, because that's the kind of thing you could elicit very fast. It's the kind of things that will come out in a very short period of time without you trying too hard, so long as you know what you're doing. And that way, you know, in 30 minutes you may cost them people. Whereas in 30 minutes you're not really going to accomplish anything if you do the other two methods. But anyway guys, that's it for now. I'll catch you again next time. Like the video, hit the notification bell, hit the like button, do whatever you do. And catch you again next one. Take it easy.